or post primer, yeah, her whole idea is to issue treasuries backed by gold, because who wants to buy treasuries? When you look at last year as an example, last year gold was up 40% and the treasury was up 4.5% in the 10-year. But gold has no counterparty risk. It can't be sanctioned. It can't be inflated away. It doesn't have default risk. And so for years now, in fact, net since 2014, central banks have been dumping treasuries, haven't been buying any new treasuries, net. Since 2014, they've sold 700 billion in treasuries and bought at least that much, if not much more, in gold, because there's always this, it's somewhat opaque how much they're actually buying and how much they're actually reporting to the IMF as they're supposed to. But things are going on all around the world that suggests they're doing all they can to not. In fact, Saudi Arabia and China have both been caught by the import-export numbers coming out of London and Switzerland, not reporting to the IMF, sorry. And China's going around buying doré and concentrate right from the miners. Doré are the crudely refined bars the miners pull out of the ground and crudely refine them and send them for full refining later, or concentrate is like a sludge byproduct. They're buying it, paying twice what the West will, sending it back to China and refining it, disintermediating the marketplace. They're already the second largest producer of silver in the world and the largest of gold. So it's very opaque how much is actually being produced and actually being accumulated. But we are heading into a place where gold and silver are taking on a whole new vision. And Judy's idea is that, look, you want to inspire confidence in our treasury market. When people really don't want to hold our treasuries, you have to do something drastic. And her idea is to back 50-year treasuries, starting with 50-year treasuries, and then perhaps later on going and doing smaller duration, but 50-year treasuries backed and redeemable in gold. And so I said to her, I said, Judy, first of all, why hasn't Fort Knox been audited? And this was a month and a half ago when I did the interview. And she said, this is before the talk of Elon Musk doing it. Well, you know, we should have done it. The excuses are horrible. She says they say that it's too expensive, logistically challenging. She says, we're the United States, for goodness sake. We ought to do this. But interestingly enough, there's another little tidbit to this. And I said, Judy, do you know that gold is held in a balance sheet, classification on every central bank balance sheet in the West? It's held in something called the gold revaluation account. And I said, do you think it's possible gold will be revaluated? And she kind of hemmed and hawed, and not directly, but somewhat indirectly suggested that they would. Now, it's not a radical thing to say that, as you know, you have the head of the Dutch National Bank screaming, we need to revalue gold in our balance sheet, or that's held on our balance sheet to offset our liabilities. Members of the German Bundesbank, we need to revalue gold to offset our liabilities on our balance sheet. It's valued at $35 an ounce across the Western world. It's valued at $42.22 in the United States, because when Nixon closed the gold window in 71, he then revalued gold from 35 to 38 in 72, and from 38 to 42.22 in 73, where it stayed on the United States government balance sheet ever since, valued at 42.22. Just marking it to market would substantially help a balance sheet that is, you could say, in default. Now, I don't think people understand how big the balance sheet problems are. I mean, 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago, worth 36 trillion in debt, on top of 170 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You could argue the game is over. So how do you get people to want to take our debt of a country that is continuing to inflate and continuing to throw on debt? And even if Elon Musk and Doge is successful in knocking off $1 trillion, that still leaves $1 trillion+ deficit each year. The debt is growing too fast, and the demand for our debt is waning in favor of the only other tier one asset next to our debt, gold, which has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury since 2000, has no counterparty risk, and no sanction risk. And so I think the possibility that I'm getting at, you know, you had Cynthia Loomis, and she's kind of going back and forth on all this. She's a senator in Wyoming who came out and said we should revalue gold, held in the gold revaluation account, in order to fund the strategic Bitcoin account. You got guys like James Rickards. I know you know Jim, and he's saying gold could go to 24,000 an ounce, and every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would add 1 trillion free and clear to the Treasury general account. He gets that number by assuming a 40% gold backing and dividing it into M1. Now, is that crazy? I don't know. How crazy is Bitcoin at 100,000? Could they do it? Absolutely. The Treasury could say any central bank that would like to deliver gold to the Treasury will be paid 24,000 an ounce. And just like that, in fact, Trump wouldn't even need much in the way of congressional approval. He would just tell his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who when he was a hedge fund advisor, that was his largest holding, gold. He gets it, to tell Jerome Powell, please revalue gold to this number. And it would be. And then all of a sudden you have options that perhaps you don't have when you are knocking on the door of 225% debt to GDP, which doesn't even take into account the unfunded liabilities. When you look at all of the things that Trump has done since he's come in, and God bless him for doing these things, we needed them. Many of these things we needed. We'd gone off the tracks culturally, but a lot of them have been kind of shock and awe. And I think that there is a possibility. Now, that's why at the beginning I said, I don't know what the plan is, other than the fact that it seems American-centric to see massive deliveries of gold and silver coming in. Massive, it looks like a run on silver now also at the LBMA. All of this coming in, never happening before, at a time when I think there's a realization that we're in trouble in terms of our debt market. Who is going to continue to fund our deficit spending? And the only way to inspire confidence, like Judy says, is to back it by gold. Well, do we need more gold and silver here? Are they reshoring it? Could it be Trump tariffs? Could it be Basel III? Or could it be something much bigger? Part of me feels that it's just too obvious. In fact, part of me feels that was the ruse to get them to send it back. And the way they do it, by the way, Adam, the COMEX contracts are very fungible. They can take that COMEX contract, and they have a deal with the LBMA where it's called exchange for physical. I'm going to send you my contract. You can liquidate and get the cash. You send me the metal. These EFPs, as they're called, have been wicked, going back and forth. Give us the metal, give us the metal, give us the metal. And then it became obvious, this isn't just Trump tariffs, because this is something much more. And I will tell you, it's an existential threat to some of these banks in the West who are massively naked short in an environment where all of a sudden, yeah, you know what? I think we'll stand for delivery after all. I don't think I want paper promises anymore. And that's like Bernie Madoff. He ran a great shop until everyone said, I'd like some money back, please. And then things got real. So I'll let your viewers decide what the reality is here. But, and then of course you get Scott Bessent saying we're going to remonetize the balance sheet. Look at the United States government balance sheet, and you don't find much in the way to remonetize. Gold is staring at you, held in the gold revaluation account. So something bigger than I think we're being led to believe is what I think is happening in the gold market. Because 70 million ounces of silver were drained from the LBMA in January. It's an all-time high monthly record. 20% of the float gone. And then here in February, another 8.6 million ounces out. So we're seeing tremendous amount of gold and silver being delivered away. And I think it is an existential threat to these banks. But when you realize that the public is being misdirected, the public has been misdirected into a risk-on trade at the worst possible time. In fact, right now, hedge fund exposure to the Mag 7 is down to a 22-month low. So the big money is moving in a different direction. They're all of a sudden kind of sliding to the risk-off category. When everyone's been talking risk-on, you have 6-to-1 insider selling versus buying. You have the Atlanta Fed now revising their GDP numbers down to negative 2.8 from 4% for the year. That's what they think we're heading into. So at the same time, the public is going all in on Bitcoin, on NVIDIA, on Apple. You have the smartest money in the world. And let me make something very clear. It would be far easier for someone to write me a check for $50 million to buy gold and silver than it would be to stand for delivery on COMEX or the LBMA. You are talking highly sophisticated traders. And I think the common denominator in highly sophisticated and very wealthy is they know the information. Who are the sovereign wealth funds? Is it the central banks wearing a different hat? or the commercial banks wearing a different hat, or the very, very, very connected wealthy elite taking $4 billion in delivery onto COMEX from JP Morgan, who only does it on behalf of customers. So my point is that I don't care what market you pick, the insiders always move before the public. Is it ironic that the insiders are selling 6-1 and the hedge funds have their lowest exposure to the Mag 7 since for 22 months, at the same time the public's moving in that direction? Or how about what has the public been jumping into for the past 2 years as the central banks net have been selling? Oh yeah, that's U.S. Treasuries. 7 trillion record in money markets, all invested in Treasuries. All of the people chasing yield in Treasuries, and 1/2, to Rick's point, of 1% allocation into gold and silver, while the most well-funded and, more importantly, well-informed traders in the globe are not only copiously accumulating gold and silver. The point I'm trying to get across is the repatriation, the taking possession of, removing counterparty liability. And in a world that is so systemically interconnected, incestuously so, that's a problem when dominoes start to fall. To your point, what could happen? Well, these bullion banks aren't just bullion banks. They're the biggest banks in the world. And these are very, very large Western money centers. You could say it's Deutsche Bank, UBS, Standard Charter, at the big European banks. Or you could say it's Bank of America. Is there any coincidence that Warren Buffett's been dumping all his Bank of America? And Ted Butler, a fantastic gold and silver analyst of the COMEX, who passed away, God rest his soul, before he died 6 months ago, was screaming that it's Bank of America who has 1 billion ounces short on paper in silver and 30 to 40 million ounces short on gold. Now, I could go into a long discussion why I believe silver has been manipulated. And I would say gold has been manipulated for a very long time for something called Gibson's paradox. It's the inverse relationship between real interest rates and gold. And forever, they suppressed gold because they maintained a situation of an illusion of wealth in a low interest rate environment where people's stock portfolios and their homes and 401ks all went up in value because rates were suppressed. It created distortions in asset prices and misallocations of capital and resources. Well, if you do that, you have to step on gold, because if gold doesn't pay a coupon or no return, well, low interest rates, Gibson's paradox would say, well, gold should be going much higher. But if you have very high interest rates, well, Gibson's paradox would say, well, you can buy treasuries with safety. The only difference this time is, who wants to buy treasuries from the nation who's the most largely indebted nation on the planet?